Thank you for tuning to our series, My Story. During these programs, we're meeting different people from different backgrounds who've had an experience of the presence of God in their lives. My name is Terry Waters, and today I'm together with Johnny McKee. And Johnny is an assistant or lead pastor, I should say, at the what do you call it now? New Life
City Church.
City Church here in Belfast. Johnny, I'd like you to tell me what it was like when you were, growing up as a pastor's son. I suppose it was super.
Not always, Terry, no. As you say, I grew up in a pastor's home as a pastor's kid. I have two sisters, and my childhood, I got to be honest, it was good. I had a great childhood. My father went to Bible college in 1978. I was 2 years of age. He spent 2 years there. We then went to Rathfriland Country Church for a couple of years. And then in 1980, we moved to Ballysillan, which is in North Belfast. And we spent 10 years there from I was 6 until I was about 16 years of age. And during those years, they were great years. I had some fun, made a lot of good friends while I was growing up. The church was good, very lively church, Pentecostal church, and we had a great youth group within the church as well. So my years of growing up from I was 6 to I was 16, I had pretty much no complaints. The only thing that I kind of complained about was maybe having to go to church on Sunday and then Sunday school in the afternoon and then church on Sunday night, while all my friends maybe during the summer were out playing football or whatever, in the street during those summer months. And I was kind of stuck in church, my trousers and my shirt and my tie or whatever, But they were pretty good years, yeah.
So at 16, your dad moved church, didn't he, to a different church?
Yeah, there was a lot of changes then kind of took place within my life from I was about kind of 15, 16 years of age. A lot of changes that took place, of things around me as well. One of the things, I suppose for me, it all started probably whenever I was about 15, 16, and I began to get prepared for my GCSEs. Up until that stage, every summer you kind of leave school in June and then you're ready to go back again in September. And up until that point, I knew what was happening in my life. It was very normal, you finished off 1 year in June and then you took a couple of months out over the summer, you enjoyed yourself, and then you went back to your next year in school. But once I started to do my GCSEs, I then began to question my life and what was going to happen with my life and where my life was going. And you're kind of asked all these questions in school. What are you going to do with your life? You're going to be leaving school very soon. And I had no idea. I hadn't got a clue. And that was kind of the first time whenever I began to really think about my life and where my life was going and the whole plan and purpose to my life. And very slowly and very surely, I began to come to a conclusion that there actually is no real purpose to my life, no real reason to me being on this earth.
Was this linked to the death of a friend as well?
Well, as I said, there's a number of changes that took place. And this was the initial thing of me I began to question my life. When I was about 16 years of age, I had a very good young friend that was shot and killed during the Troubles. He was a member of our youth group in the church, and it happened on a Monday night whenever we were meeting as a youth down in the church. He worked in a video shop in Ballysillan, just about 100 yards away from the church, just up the street. Very often, if I was coming down to the Sunday school, if I was walking down by myself, then I would call in if he was maybe working in the shop that day. And rather than head on down to Sunday school, I would just spend 45 minutes or an hour in the video shop watching a video with him. And then I would walk home and tell my dad that I had a great time in Sunday school.
Oh dear, dear.
And very rarely, as well on a Monday night, coming down to youth, if he didn't want to go down or whatever, then I'd just maybe spend some time with him. But on this Monday night, we were all kind of gathered together in the back hall of the church, and there was this commotion went on, and very soon news began to filter through that Andrew had been shot and that he was dead. And it was a massive shock to us, and to my whole thoughts again about God, because I'm thinking, oh God, Andrew was a brilliant, brilliant guy, real, pleasure to be around. Wasn't a bad bone in his body, and I'm thinking he didn't deserve to die. God, how can you let these things happen? You know, so you're then questioning again this whole purpose of life. And I'm thinking, well, you know, if we can get shot at any stage, then, you know, what's the point? So all these things, my dad then, he finished off in the church, having been there for 10 years. And he then left and went full time in the youth work and in the youth ministry through a thing called Stadium Projects. So we had left the church. We'd also moved house. So everything that I knew from I was 16 was all seemed to be gone in an instant, in the matter of a short couple of months. Moved away from home. We didn't move that far away from home, you know, where we moved to, but because there was no such thing back in those days as mobile phones and internet and Facebook or anything like that there, so I couldn't get in contact with my friends or anything, you know, so I was totally away from everything. And over those 3 years, from I was 16 until I was 19, these thoughts of there is no plan, there is no purpose to my life. The only reason that I'm alive is because pastors have kids, they're married and have children, and I just happen to be the son of a pastor.
I'm sure a lot of pastors' sons and a lot of other people growing up go through this period of 16 to 20, you know, in their later teenage years, of trying to question what life is all about. What changed then at the age of 19 when you went to Canada?
Well, like I say, you know, from 16 to 19, all these thoughts, God's got no plan and purpose for my life. And I had come to the conclusion during those times. I mean, whenever Andrew was killed, there was a drama. This team had done a drama that summer at this Bible week that we were at, and during that drama, it portrayed someone who was shot, or someone who died in a car crash, a young man who died in a car crash. His family were Christians, and he died and he went to heaven. And the singer kind of portrays these two pictures of the family in mourning and praying as their son is lying on a hospital bed, praying that God will heal him and bring him back to life. And then it's portraying this other picture of this young man in heaven. And they dedicated it to the memory of Andrew. And everybody, you know, was in floods of tears, you know, especially all our youth group who was there, you know, who remembered Andrew so well, but, you know, thinking that he's now in heaven. And people kind of regretting or whatever, you know, thinking, well, Andrew's died. How could this happen? And in my mind, I thought, you know what, a part of me wanted it to be me that was shot and killed, because I just didn't want to be on this earth. And so at 19, I went away to Canada for a couple of weeks. We were supposed to go in March. There was two of us were supposed to go. We were supposed to go in March, and it was postponed. And we thought, well, it's not going to happen. They had said, no, we'll send you out another time. And they sent us out in June. So we went out in June for 2 weeks. And I had the express intention that, you know what, I have been brought up in church all my life. I know that there's a God, you know, of that, you know, I had no doubt. But for me, God didn't want anything to do with me. He had no plan and purpose for my life. You know, the only fact that I was here was because I'm a pastor's kid. And so I decided, okay, after these 2 weeks in Canada, I'm done with church, I'm done with God, and when I come back again, I'm going to start living my life my way. I'm not going back to church, and I'm just going to go out. I'm going to go out to clubs, I'm going to go to parties, and I'm going to live life my way. I'm finished with church and with God altogether, because there is no plan and purpose to my life. The second day, we turned up at the airport, and we actually very nearly didn't even get into Canada because we were so young. I was 19, the friend that was with me, he was 17 or 18. And we were actually going on a bit of a business trip because we were learning things about business, and what we were wanting to do was to make puppets and to sell puppets, you know, to churches or whatever, you know, for to do different schools work and things like that there. And whenever we turned up at the airport, we had marked on our wee cards, so this is a business trip and all, you know. So these guys in the airport, you know, customs and that, are saying these are two jokers, you know, we're not going to let these guys in. And they pulled us into a separate room, and we're sitting there and started to ask us all these questions, and they weren't going to let us into Canada, you know. And we were like cracking up, you know. We were like, and one person would have came, one officer would have came and asked us all these series of questions, and then they would have went, and then someone else would have come in and asked us the same questions, and then someone else, and we were like, we've already answered those questions, you know, and we're starting to crack up with these people. And one of the guys came, and he turned around and he says, look, all we need to do, we just want to make sure that if we let you in, that you're going to be leaving. Because we were so angry at this stage, my friend who was with me turned to the officer and says, "Oh, don't worry, we'll be leaving." You know. So eventually they let us in, and we were able to get in. And on the second day, we're jet lagged. We're sitting in this big conference, you know, all to do with puppets and things. They got their massive big thing, and I was sitting, I was like near falling asleep, you know, I was that tired from the jet lag. And the guy who was taking this workshop that I was at, he talked about this Billy Graham crusade that was going to be happening in Toronto Sky Dome. And I began to think, oh, I'd like to go to a Billy Graham crusade, you know, and because I'd never been before, and obviously, you know, great evangelist that he is. And then he said, well, and DC Talk are going to be there, and Michael W. Smith. Well, anybody that was kind of in church, you know, and liked a bit of music, you know, around about the kind of mid-90s and that there, DC Talk were very popular back then. Mm-hmm. And I loved them, you know, and I thought, I've got to get here. I've got to go there. I want to see them live. I want to see DC Talk. You know, it wasn't about Billy Graham or anybody else. I want to see DC Talk. And I remember after the workshop, I went into the bathroom and I just prayed and just says, God, you've got to get me there. I've got to get there, and I've got to get the whole way back. You know, send someone who can take us there. Later on that afternoon, a girl turned up, and she says to the two of us, she says, do you want to go tonight? I says, yeah, I would love to go. She says, well, there's a crowd of us going. Come with us. We'll take you the whole way there, and we'll bring you the whole way back. And for the first time, I began to sense God's doing something. You know, God has done something here in my life. We went the whole way there, an amazing night. Toronto Sky Dome, 70,000 young people, the place was packed. We were down on the floor of this baseball stadium, and I'm looking around at all these 70,000 young people, and just this amazing atmosphere, and an incredible night. But I remember looking and I remember thinking, you know what, God, there's nothing like this back home. Nothing comes anywhere close to this. And God began to do something in my heart in that moment as I looked around and I thought, you know, all these youth events that are taking place in America and in Canada, and there's nothing like this back home. And I began to think, God, I would love to do something like this back home. Even though in my mind I'm thinking, you know, God, I want nothing to do with you. God began to open up my heart and began to place seeds in my heart, you know, of what He wanted me to do. We left that night. We went on our journey then over the next 2 weeks that we were there. And during the 2 weeks that we were there, we were staying with a Christian family who were taking us to different meetings. I remember going to one meeting, someone came up to me who I'd never met, who didn't know me, who didn't know what was going on in my heart, who didn't know that the problems and the issues that I had. And they says to me, Johnny, God's got a plan and a purpose for your life. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. And it near floored me. And it pounded on my heart. And it was God speaking to me. And in that instant, it was like something began to break inside of me. That happened on another 2 occasions while we were in Canada. 3 people who didn't know each other, 3 different occasions, 3 different meetings. They didn't know each other and they didn't know me. And every single person said, Johnny, God's got a plan and a purpose for your life.
So actually, it's a point that we could perhaps just pause on for a second, Johnny, because there are lots and lots of young people, especially in Ireland, and we know from the suicide rates and all the rest of it, that they feel utterly deserted, lost, not sure about life or whether it's worth living.
Yeah.
What would you say to them, looking back onto that experience? Where can they find hope?
For me, I think the 2 greatest things that anybody could ever know in their life is, number 1, a true sense of identity, of knowing who they are, and number 2 is purpose. When Jesus, at the age of 12, he disappeared from his parents, you know, and they were in Jerusalem and they went the day's journey and they realized, where's Jesus? They went back to find him and they found him in the temple, and he's speaking with rabbis and with Pharisees, and as they approach Jesus, as his parents approach him, his response is, I must be about my Father's business. Jesus knew who his Father was and knew what he was about. And for me, I had no identity and no purpose. And I think that one of the main reasons why we have so many suicide rates and people with serious mental health issues is that they have no true sense of identity and no true purpose. And that was my problem. That was my issue. And I discovered that we will only discover our true identity. Our identities are wrapped up in our experiences in life. So because we were maybe abused, then that our identity is found in that abuse, or something else that has happened to us in life. Our identity is based on what we have experienced, and other people will give us that identity. Oh, well, that's the person who did this, or that's the person who this happened to them, and their identity is wrapped up in that, which is a false identity. And our true identity will only ever be found in the person of Jesus Christ.
That's right.
Coming into that relationship with Jesus Christ. And it's in Jesus Christ that not only do we find out who we are, but we also find out why we're here, because he gives us the real purpose and the real reason for life and for being alive on this earth.
Johnny, you made a very clear point there, that knowing who we are in God.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of young people don't even know there's a God.
Yeah.
How would you suggest that they begin to search for God?
First of all, I would say just be open and honest. Whether you believe in God or not, be in no doubt that there is a God. And the message of the Bible is not so much about us trying to reach God, but it's about God trying to reach us. And in him sending his son Jesus, God is reaching out to this world, and God is reaching out to mankind. And so God is on a search for human hearts. And as you be honest with God and say, God, reveal yourself to me, show yourself to me, he will reveal himself to you. Be in no doubt that that will happen.
Now, there are a lot of young people the same as you, Johnny, brought up in a Christian home, Christian background, and being, if you like, carried along by the family faith. Mm-hmm. Being part of a Christian family.
Yeah.
What probably happened to you, I suggest, in Canada, was that for the first time, maybe in real depth, you had an experience of the presence of God that was yours,
Yeah.
rather than the family faith.
Yeah.
And maybe we could just encourage people to recognize that, yes, it's beautiful to be brought up in a family home where Christ is Lord, where he is recognized and honored. But no child, even of the manse or the pastor's son, becomes a Christian because of what happened to mum or dad or the family. Mm-hmm. They become a Christian when they actually meet Jesus for themselves.
Yeah.
And I just would say to young people, especially if you feel disillusioned as you're growing up, somehow it doesn't work anymore, just say, Lord, please reveal yourself to me as a personal God. I believe you're there, but I need to know it deep inside. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We just need to share that.
Yeah.
Now, you come back home and you start all guns blazing, real enthusiasm.
Yeah, I mean, I was on fire for God. The only word that I could use to describe what happened to me in Canada was that God revolutionized my life. Yeah. I had gone with the express intention, I'm finished with church and I'm finished with God. That was me, done and dusted. And whenever I come home again, I will not set foot in church again. I will not have anything more to do with God. I'm finished. And the things that happened in Canada just revolutionized my life. And I look back to that point as being that point whenever I got my faith in God, when I got my own personal faith in God. When I was standing in the Toronto Sky Dome in the Billy Graham Crusade, and I'm looking around and I'm seeing all these young people, and I'm thinking, God, there's nothing like this back home. And there was something in my heart to do youth events. And when I came home again, like I say, I was just, what we call on fire for God, where you have this passion for God, this deep in your heart passion, And I had an opportunity then in the centre that the church was in. We had begun a youth event that we call Big House, that we run about 4 times a year. We had a number of different stages in the main hall. We had a main stage for the worship band and any bands that came in. We had other stages for puppets, for drama, for mime, for poetry. We had a big screen for the audio visuals and things like that there. So everything and anything that was going, we were trying to get it in there. At one stage, we brought our guest speaker on the back of a motorbike, and he's coming in the back of this motorbike, and another time it's just as well that we owned the building. We cut a hole in the ceiling, and we abseiled the speaker down through a hole in the ceiling onto the stage.
It's one way of grasping attention.
Yeah, it was just, and it was brilliant. It was really, really, really good. An amazing time that we had there. So right away, God was getting me involved with youth ministry, with youth outreach, and with youth events.
Were they responding? Were the young people becoming Christians?
Oh yeah, there was kids becoming Christians, and it was because it was back like in the mid-90s, and there wasn't really anything like that happening in churches, certainly to our knowledge at that time, and so in a way it was kind of a little bit pioneering of what we were doing and the way that we were doing it, and so that went on for a few years. And after probably about 2 years, I think it was probably about 21 years of age, and I'd become the youth pastor in the church. It's kind of strange how that had happened as well, because I remember I had this book in my room, and it was called Pastoring Youth in a New Generation by a guy called Wendell Smith. And I remember trying to read through the book, and it meant nothing to me, because I was grasping, at anything that I could prior to Canada, and trying to, see, is there anything there? And it was like it was written in Hebrew. I just couldn't, it just didn't resonate with me at all. Once I was asked to become the youth pastor in the church, and I remember sitting there because I was thinking about it and I was praying about it. And I looked up, and on my bookshelf, I caught a glimpse of this book again, and I brought it down, and it was like a brand new book. Every word on that page resonated with me. And I thought, God, let's do this. And I became the youth pastor in the church.
Obviously, you had many years of being youth pastor, working, became married, have 3 children now?
Two boys.
2 children, 2 boys. Sorry, maybe there's another one on the way.
No.
But you found after 10 years that there was a bit of a burnout problem.
Yeah, just before 10 years it would have been. Once I'd become the youth pastor, and I was doing a lot of youth work and doing a lot of youth events, and I was actually getting some money from that as well. But after, and everything was going brilliant up until I was about 24 years of age. I just couldn't believe how much that God had turned my life around. I couldn't believe where I had come from and where God had placed me and what He was calling me to and what He was doing in my life. I just was always astounded, and still am astounded by it to this day, of how He has transformed me. And so I began to get involved in ministry in the church in various different ways. But things then began to change, and some significant changes and things that happened that outside of my control, that I couldn't deal with, that I really struggled with, decisions that other people had made, that totally rocked my world. I thought, well, this is it. I've gone through my kind of wilderness experience, as a teenager, and everything's going to be great from here on in, and nothing's ever going to go wrong. But it did, and I ended up working as kind of the kind of funds had kind of dried up, and I ended up my week. Consisted of me working as a courier during the day. So I started work at 6:30 in the morning.
Can I break in just a little bit, because we're getting towards the end of the interview. Time is absolutely gone. You really had a bit of a burnout in as much as you've been really rushing. Life was hectic. I think a lot of people go through it. You went back to America for a little while. We've only got a couple of minutes.
I'd come to the point where I decided, I can't do this ministry anymore, because I was basically doing everything. The problem was I wasn't taking in as much of God as what I should be, and I was giving out too much than what I was actually taking in. And I'd made a decision, come Christmas time, I need to stop doing ministry, which I knew was wrong, because I knew God has called me to do this here. And I went away to Canada, or not to Canada, to Williamsburg, to a church in Williamsburg, to some friends in a church there. They were having this youth conference. And I remember one of the guys that was speaking at the church was a guy called Judah Smith. Judah Smith happened to be the son of Wendell Smith, who wrote Pastoring, So all these wee things that God does for you, But I remember standing in one of the worship services, and the worship leader, they were just in free worship, And I was standing at the back of the hall, and it was just really, God, you need to do something here. And at one point of the songs, the worship leader, he lifted the guitar off his head to just be involved in free worship. And as he lifted the guitar off his head, something that was the heaviness that was in me, the stuff that I was carrying, just lifted. I just felt it lift out of me. And I came home again, then just refreshed by God. God then beginning to get me back on track and get me back to where he wanted me to be. And then begins to get me involved again in youth events and youth ministry. After the youth ministry, I went on and became a minister in training with Elim Pentecostal churches and got ordained as a church minister. And so I've been the lead pastor in New Life City Church for a few years now. And
I think a lot of people in Christian leadership, especially when you're kind of almost rocketed into it, experience this burnout, where somehow what you do is more important than the relationship you have with the Lord. I'd like us just to talk to, and you look to this particular camera over here, just speak to maybe young pastors, and if you like, maybe talk to them about the need to keep that personal relationship with Jesus fresh, and to make sure that even in the busyness of what you're doing, that there is that personal time with God. Just a minute.
Being a Christian, as we know, is about having a relationship with Jesus Christ, and that's the main focus. And it becomes so easy whenever you're involved in ministry just to put that to the side and to neglect it. And the more that you do that, then the easier that it becomes. And I just want to encourage any young minister out there, anyone involved in ministry, to maintain your focus on God, to maintain your focus on who you are in Christ, your identity in Christ. Your identity is not in what you do for God. Your identity is in the person of Jesus Christ. Any pastors' kids that have seen this, missionaries' kids growing up in church, I want to tell you that God has a specific plan and purpose for your life that is perhaps separate from your parents, that is not in any way connected to that, but your own specific plan and purpose. And I just want to encourage you to discover and find out what that plan and purpose is that God has for you. Get into a relationship with God, and everything else will fall into place, I can guarantee it.
That applies to every one of us that are involved in any kind of ministry. It has to be God first. Allow the presence of God to increase in your life by spending time with God. Thank you so much for joining with us in this interview, not only to you, Johnny, but to those that have been listening. We appreciate you taking time to watch this program. If you need further help, you'll see details of people you can contact at the end of the program. Thank you and God bless you.